First of all, thank you all for being here today, and to be respectful to everyone's time. We have a busy day, and I know you all have a busy day. I am Phil Rowe, Chairman of the Veterans Affairs Committee, and I've asked you to be here. Today to let us explain our situation with the Blue Water Navy. For those of you all who may not be aware, most of you are, but for your viewers or readers or listeners, there was a presumption made if you served in Vietnam, put boots on the ground, or went up the brown water, that if you were exposed to dioxin, Agent Orange, or other herbicides, that there may be some illnesses that were exacerbated or caused by this exposure. This also occurred in Korea, where the DMZ was also sprayed, that I walked through many times over 40 years ago. Many of these presumptions, I'll just briefly go over a couple of them: chronic B-cell lymphoma, type 2 diabetes, ischemic heart disease, Hodgkin's disease, multiple myeloma, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, prostate cancer, other respiratory cancers, and many other presumptions. The group that was left out were the men and women who served on the surface ships just off the coast of Vietnam. And now for over 3 decades, we, as a legislative body, have tried to come to some resolution about how these men and women should be treated. This committee, and I want to thank all members of this committee who have stepped up and really tried to resolve this problem and to once and for all get this off the table for our nation's heroes. We have had a bill that was debated thoroughly here in this committee, in this very room. It was passed overwhelmingly, 382 to 0, without a single objection through here, and we discussed it in great detail. It's been a little bit frustrating because we had a CBO score that we paid for, and I want to thank our VSO partners for being right along with us, because what we did to pay for this were increase some fees for housing when you, for making a loan, for a home, a VA loan. And these increased fees coming from veterans went to veterans. And this was a major step to get this paid for and to treat everybody exactly the same. When we pass this over to the Senate, Senator Isakson and Tester have been great partners. They have really, really worked very hard to get this legislation passed. There have been some objections, and 2 of those objections from the Senate were the science based behind this, which I've read both studies. My background as a physician, I have read both of them. The science is, at best, I'll say it's not great, the presumption and the cause and effect of this. But it's time to move past that. And I want to thank the committee for going along and listening to all the testimony we've had here about that issue. Number 2 was paying for it. And it seemed like every time we would pay for it, there'd be another roadblock that would come up. We'd meet that roadblock. We'd say, we have the funding for this, even when the CBO score went up. And I feel very comfortable about this bill being fully funded. I want to read you just a quote that Dr. Shulkin, the previous VA secretary, said. "There is no doubt our Vietnam veterans have waited way too long for us to bring this to resolution. The problem, as you know, it will not be guided by scientific evidence, as I just mentioned. I wish that it is good policy for us to be able to get solid scientific evidence, so we just have to do the right thing. And I appreciate your leadership on this and you wanting to bring this to resolution. I will be meeting this afternoon with the Blue Water veterans. I am absolutely committed to working with you and the rest of the committee to bring this to resolution. They shouldn't be waiting any longer." I could not agree more. And I'm willing to, and I know this members of this committee who've been incredibly, incredibly supportive of veterans' issues are willing to stay here as long as we need to stay here to get this job done. And if we don't, we have to start all over again in next Congress. We're this close to solving a decades-old problem for 90,000 of our colleagues. And I said this, and I say this as a personal thing. If we wait long enough, it won't matter because they'll all be gone. And we cannot do that any longer. At this point, there are going to be many speakers, and so they're going to introduce each other. It's my privilege today to introduce the vice-ranking member, the next chairman of the committee, Mr. Takano of California.
Thank you, Chairman Rowe, for the introduction and for putting together this press conference on such short notice, and to all my colleagues here today, and especially I know how much this means to you, it means a lot to all of us, the work we've been able to do on a bipartisan basis. There's a joke that sometimes the enemy isn't the other party, it's the Senate. And the Senate's not the enemy, but in this particular case, they're being awfully difficult. In June, the House unanimously passed the Blue Water Navy Vietnam Veterans Act, but sadly, Blue Water Navy veterans are still waiting for their government to deliver on the promise it made to them years ago. All because a handful, and I mean a handful, of my Republican Senate colleagues are putting partisan politics ahead of the justice these veterans are owed. The clock is ticking. We are running out of time, and our veterans should not be kept waiting any longer. I urge Leader McConnell to do the right thing by our veterans and bring up our House bill for a vote in the Senate before they gavel out for the holidays. Our House bill would pass overwhelmingly with bipartisan support. There really is no better way to close out this Congress than by coming together on this important issue. It would be a grave injustice for us to have to go through this process again in the next Congress because our Republican counterparts in the Senate have once again decided to block a good piece of legislation. And again, I can't thank Chairman Rowe enough for continuing to demand Senate action on this issue, and I commend his leadership. To our VSOs and veterans watching at home, no matter what the outcome, know that we will keep working on the issue of toxic exposures in the 116th Congress. I want to emphasize, now is really not the time to be talking about new pay-fors. We don't have enough time to debate them. I am confident, as Chairman Rowe is, that we can pay for this. I'm glad that you're dubious about the science in the analysis. I am looking forward to working with all my colleagues in the committee to continue making this a priority. And now I'd like to introduce the chairman of the Subcommittee on Disability Assistance and Memorial Affairs, my colleague from the state of Illinois, I believe, Chairman Bost.
Thank you, Chairman Takano. Let me just say this. All of us up here are up here doing this in a bipartisan manner. Why? Because it's the right thing to do. We know this bill. We know why we worked on it. We know that we have the pay for. It is ridiculous that our veterans are meant to be hung out on the line and wait longer because the Senate can't decide to move it. We deal with it with many other bills, and it's a pretty common occurrence around here. But this bill, it goes to the heart of those men and women who served. We have come up with the bill. It was unanimously passed. That's why we're showing this bipartisan effort here. That's why each one of us are stepping forward. We want to thank the VSOs. We want to thank the chairman for his hard work. All of us worked very, very hard at this. It does not need to die in the Senate. It needs to move on so we can move on to other things. And with that, I need to introduce a representative from California, Representative Valadao.
Thanks, Mike. First, I want to say thank you to Chairman Rowe. When this bill was introduced earlier this Congress, I remember having a conversation with the chairman and him specifically saying that this was his #1 priority. And you've stuck to that word, and the amount of effort you've put into this has been truly amazing, so I really appreciate everything you've done, and especially hosting this today. I'd like to thank all the members for being here today. We've worked really hard on this bill. This bill's been out for a while. I introduced it this Congress, but other members had it before me, and it's one of those things that every single day it seems to just get, time passes and nothing happens. And today we know that there are probably about 90,000 Vietnam-era veterans that can benefit from this, with only a small percentage of them actually showing any sort of signs that that would actually require these benefits. But still, we made a promise to these veterans. We made this promise when we passed the Agent Orange Act of 1991, and Congress intended to take care of our veterans, and it was a promise made, and I think it's a promise that should be kept. The VA's 2002 decision that reversed that is a sad situation for our veterans. And when you think about the number of veterans out there being such a small number, and it's a promise that could be easily kept. Yes, there's a cost to it, but it's minimal, and there is a cost to a lot of things we do in Washington, but this is one that you've got folks who put their lives on the line for our country, for our freedom. There is no reason why the Senate shouldn't step up and pass this piece of legislation. It passed unanimously off the House floor. How many pieces of legislation come up and pass unanimously? To have support from both sides of the aisle and not have the opportunity to at least have a vote on the Senate floor now coming down on us few remaining days. And when you look at the Senate, all those senators have to look at one another and think to themselves, how many people are going to die by the time this bill comes up in the next Congress? Why wait another day? Why wait another year? And we all know the process here is slow. The House can move things usually pretty quick, but the Senate moves very, very slow. And so to have it so close, to be right on their doorstep, to have the ability to have this done and potentially give all these Blue Water Navy veterans a Christmas present seems disappointing to me that they wouldn't take this up and take the opportunity to do the right thing here. So again, I'd like to thank all my colleagues. The incoming chairman, I hope that this will be a priority for you as well as it was for our outgoing chairman. And we were lucky to have this much support, and I, again, thank everyone for being here today and playing such an important role in this. And next, I'm supposed to call up my friend and colleague from California, Lou Correa.
Thank you, Mr. Valadao. Just wanted to say thank you to all our veterans for your service to our country. Thank you to our Vietnam War vets. Congressman Correa here from California, home of the largest number of veterans in the country, and we are blessed to have you. Vietnam War vets, we should have welcomed you back as heroes decades ago. We didn't. Today have the opportunity to fix that wrong just a little bit more by giving you what you've earned, by keeping our promise to you, taking care of you. Democrats and Republicans standing here, Democrats and Republicans that have vetted a bill that works, a bill that's paid for. And today I simply ask the Senate and the President to do what's right. Let's move this legislation forward. Let's not keep our veterans waiting, and let's keep our promise to our heroes. God bless America. God bless our veterans. Thank you very much. And now I'd like to introduce my member from California, ranking member in the Health Committee, Member Brownlee.
Thank you, Mr. Correa. Good morning. Thank you, Dr. Rowe, and to all my colleagues on both sides of the aisle who are here today. I think this bipartisan showing demonstrates just how important and pressing this issue is. Our nation made a promise to the Blue Water Vietnam veterans the day they took the oath to protect our country, to serve them as they have so bravely served us. It is our responsibility to make good on that promise, and finally, after so many years, to ensure they receive the benefits they have earned and they deserve. What kind of message does it send to every man and woman wearing a uniform stationed around the world in harm's way if we let this year end with no resolution to this injustice? So I call on my Senate colleagues to immediately pass the House version of this legislation so we can get it to the President's desk for signature at long last. I thank you again for all being here, and it's my privilege to introduce the Vice Chair of the committee, Mr. Bilirakis from Florida.
Thank you. Thank you, Representative Brownlee. I appreciate it so very much. First, I want to say something, if you don't mind. I want to commend Chairman Rowe. A good friend of mine by the name of Tony Orlando, who's a tremendous veterans advocate, a great singer, by the way, as well. I heard him once in a television interview say that they asked him in the program, are you a Democrat or a Republican? And he said, what difference does it make in this case? I'm for the veteran. I'm for the veteran. And this is the way Chairman Rowe has led this committee these last 2 years, and he should be commended for it. We appreciate your service, sir, in the military, but your continued service as well. So we've got to get this done, folks, for our veterans, our Blue Water Navy veterans. We promised them that we were going to get this done. We fulfilled that promise in the House of Representatives. You've heard it. Everywhere I go, I speak to a lot of veterans groups, but also general audiences, and there's always a Blue Water Navy veteran in that audience. I understand there are 90,000, and we can't wait for the science. We've waited long enough. We have to get this done. The Senate must move. And I appreciate Chairman Rowe and, of course, the Vice Chair, Ranking Member, but future Chairman holding this press conference. We're not going to give up. We're not going to give up. This has to get done this Congress. And I know the vast majority on both sides of the aisle in the Senate are for this particular bill. So we've got to give, our veterans have earned these benefits. Let's get it done for them, our true heroes. Thank you. Yeah, Representative Peters, I want to introduce him. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bilirakis. You know, a lot of us are often frustrated by the overwhelming partisanship in this place and how it really seems to make it impossible to work together to get something done. And I want to say that what a pleasure it is to be part of the Veterans Affairs Committee, which I don't think there's any question is the most bipartisan committee in Congress. Here we have something that's almost universally agreed upon with respect to Blue Water veterans. We've lost 41,000 already. We owe it to them to take care of this before we lose a single one more, and we can do that today. So we're urging the Senate to take that vote, to move this forward, and to give these veterans, to give you all the support that you deserve on this issue. I want to thank Chairman Rowe for your leadership. I want to thank, in his absence, Ranking Member Waltz, the future governor of Minnesota, and our new chairman, Mr. Takano, and look forward to working on this to get it done. Let's get it done today, but I can assure you if we don't get it done today, we'll start again on January 3rd and get right back on it. And I'm introducing Dr. Dunn.
Thank you very much. Let me add my voice of support to this for Chairman Rowe and incoming Chairman Takano. This is a bill that is long overdue. This was a thoughtless oversight when the bill was passed. These sailors have suffered enough at the hands of our government and our society. It's time we do something right for them. And the fact that you have unanimous agreement on the committee and in the entire House that this is the right thing to do should underscore that. And I'm going to turn the microphone over to somebody who I think will give more meaning to that than I ever can. He's my good friend, my fellow veteran, Marine veteran from Vietnam, Lieutenant General Jack Bergman.
Thanks, Dr. Dunn. Folks, it's an honor to be among you, especially under the leadership of Dr. Rowe these last 2 years, and Ranking Member Waltz himself, a sergeant major. So when you get a sergeant major and a doctor in the room, as the general, you're number 3 in the pecking order. You know that to start with. And that's okay because, you know, it's not where you start, it's where you finish in life. So let's talk about theory versus reality. And we have some, I guess, some concerns across in the other building on the other side of the Capitol that the science isn't well-founded. Okay, so there's some theory there, there's some reality. I'd like to put some reality in it for you today. Come along with me as a helicopter aircraft commander flying on and off Navy ships in Vietnam in the 1972 timeframe. You could have been a part of the crew, you could have been a part of the infantry, you could in some cases even been part of the press to go along on that ride and think about how we left the ship, we flew, we landed, we got out, we did our business, got back on the helicopter, and came back aboard the ship. We didn't wash it down in a sterile environment, whether it be the helicopter or our flight suits or our camis or whatever we were watching. Let's enough with the confidence in the science. That's the reality. Get the bill passed. Do the right thing for all of our naval service veterans who served in Vietnam. We owe it to them, and welcome home.
Thank you.
You can see in my passion, I forgot I was supposed to do next, but that's okay. I had turned the rotor brake on and it was stopped safely. My honor to introduce Rep. Zeldin from New York.
Well, thank you, General. And this really is something that should have been done by now. We shouldn't even have to get together as we are today. I want to commend all of my colleagues here on both sides of the aisle championing this issue day in and day out. and also all of the veterans advocates here who, while there are millions of Americans all throughout this entire country relying on people in Washington to be fighting for them, advocating on the Hill, the men and women who are here and many in the audience as well, this isn't your first time at this committee. This isn't your first time at the Hill. You're always here advocating for causes that are so important. And to the General's point, if you actually go out into our districts and meet these Vietnam veterans who are suffering the impacts of exposure to Agent Orange, try to convince them that science is not there, there are no facts to support the argument that this bill is essential. Say to the face of all of those Vietnam veterans who are suffering, some who have been suffering for a very long time. That requires a lot more courage than standing at your desk with a gavel, with your microphone turned on, saying that there's no science. And I think as long as they're not willing to look those veterans in the eye and say that science is not on their side, they need to stand down and remove their opposition to this bill so that it would pass. I'm proud to represent the 1st Congressional District of New York. It's on the east end of Long Island. In Suffolk County, my home county, we have the highest population of veterans of any county in New York, one of the highest veterans populations of any county in the entire country. And for us, we have a lot of Vietnam veterans who are personally advocating to me, to Congressman King, Congressman Swazi, Congresswoman Rice. We hear it all across Long Island, so we know that facts and reality are on our side. I want to point out that this bill includes a proposal that I had filed, the Flexible VA Loan Guarantee Act. This legislation was passed by the House last Congress. It expands veterans' opportunity for home ownership by removing that cap on VA home loans. So I want to thank Chairman Rowe not only for his efforts for moving this bill, but also including so many other great proposals. This is a bill that is a product of a committee working exceptionally well, and as someone who has served on other committees here in Congress, I concur that this is the most bipartisan committee that exists on the Hill, and that's a credit to both Republicans and Democrats who I stand with. So I thank all of them, and our final message, my final message, I won't speak on behalf of anyone else, my final message to all my colleagues in the Senate is to get your priorities straight and pass this bill before you go home for Christmas recess. At this time, it is an honor to be able to introduce the first of the several veteran advocates who are here, Carlos Fuentes from the Veterans of Foreign Wars.
Thank you, sir. On behalf of the Veterans of Foreign Wars, first and foremost, I'd like to thank all the members that are here today. It shows such a broad support here in the House, and specifically Chairman Rowe and soon-to-be Chairman Takano, and now Governor Walz for their leadership in getting us to where we are today. Also, Chairman Isaacson, Ranking Member Tester, for their continued advocacy and relentless fight over in the Senate side. You know, on behalf of the veterans who are impacted by this bill, you know, they're sick and dying, and I've spoken to Blue Water Navy veterans who have terminal prostate cancer, family members who recently lost their loved ones to conditions associated to Agent Orange, veterans whose lives depend on the passage of this bill. These veterans are sick and dying, and they're being deprived of benefits that they have earned. You know, my good friend Gene Clark is turning 72 just this past week, and tells me that his fight is diminishing. It's disgraceful that veterans who desperately need health care and benefits to prolong their lives are being denied that opportunity by two senators, Senator Lee, who thinks the evidence is not there, and I'll tell him, VFW tells him, we don't need more sick veterans to prove sufficient evidence. And Senator Enzi, who thinks we don't have enough money to take care of veterans. If America can't afford to take care of its veterans, then we need to stop creating them. You know, I'm not a Blue Water Navy veteran, but as an Iraq War veteran, taking care of Blue Water Navy veterans sets a tone that Congress will stand by the newest generation of veterans when we need them. And this must be done. The VFW will continue this fight. Blue Water, Korea DMZ, Thailand veterans have been denied benefits for too long. and the VFW will not rest until this bill is passed. So thank you very much. With that, I would like to turn it to my good friend, Randy Rees, the Executive Director of Disabled American Veterans.
Good morning, all. On behalf of our 1 million members and auxiliary of DAV, we are deeply disappointed that this bicameral, bipartisan effort in Congress to pass the Blue Water Navy Vietnam Veterans Act have been blocked by just a couple of senators. Despite passing in the House in June by unanimous 382 to 0, the Senate has been unable to take further action solely due to opposition from Senator Mike Lee of Utah and Senator Mike Enzi of Wyoming. Although our united efforts fell short so far this year, we've made historic progress, and today's the opportunity to right the wrong. I want to recognize and thank members of the House who led the Blue Water Navy effort, particularly Dr. Phil Rowe, Chairman of the House Veterans Affairs Committee, Congressman Tim Waltz, incoming Chairman Mark Takano, and Congressman David Valadao. We're also grateful to all the bipartisan efforts in the Senate, led by VA Committee Chairman Johnny Isakson, Ranking Member John Tester, and Senators Gillibrand and Daines. Contrary to what Senators Lee and Enzi, as well as VA, are saying, it was a bureaucratic decision in 2002 that excluded Blue Water Navy veterans, not any scientific evidence. And it's long past the time for Congress to correct this injustice before it's too late for our Vietnam veterans. We reject the suggestion that our nation cannot afford the cost of caring for and compensating our Blue Water Navy veterans for their wartime service-connected disabilities. These brave men and women have earned these benefits, and we have sacrificed we have a sacred obligation, all of us, to ensure the promises are fulfilled. Although we did not get the legislation over the finish line just yet, hopefully we can get that done today, but if not, rest assured we are not done. We will not let the opposition from just a handful of senators block the will of Congress and the will of the American people to do what's right. We are committed to working with leaders in the House and hopefully in the Senate as well to quickly take this up and pass this legislation, if not passed today, as one of the very first actions of the new 116th Congress. We'll be calling on Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell to make these forgotten heroes a priority by scheduling floor time and debate to vote on this legislation early next year. We will continue calling on Senators Lee and Enzi to listen to the voices of America's veterans, including those in Utah and in Wyoming, and to put an end to their blockade of Blue Water Navy legislation. And we're calling on President Trump to stand up for all of our America's veterans by declaring support of the legislation. The time to take action is now, before the Vietnam generation is gone. At this time, I'll introduce my colleague from the American Legion, Chena.
Good morning. My name is Shinin Nantavong. I have the honor of serving as the National Director of Veterans Affairs and Rehabilitation for the American Legion and our nearly 2 million members. Allow me to begin by thanking Chairman Rowe and Congressman Takano and other members of this committee for holding this event. It is unfortunate to be standing here today under a massive cloud of disappointment. Instead of celebrating and applauding that Blue Water Navy veterans will receive the quality care and benefits they deserve from VA. The members of this committee have put their energy into action, and H.R. 299 was passed out of the House without a vote in opposition. The American Legion and our nearly 2 million members are extremely disappointed that this common sense bill was not sent to President Trump, who promised so aggressively to take care of the men and women who served our country. We are proud to stand with Chairman Rowe, Congressman Takano, and the members of this committee in support of our Blue Water Navy veterans. Thank you for continuing to work in a bipartisan manner to assist the veterans of our great nation. It is my privilege now to introduce Rick Wadman from Vietnam Veterans of America.
want to thank Dr. Rowe as well as Mr. Walls in absentia and the new incoming chairman, Mr. Takano from California. You can't have a little bit of integrity. You either have integrity or you don't. For the Office of Post-Deployment Health to keep insisting that the science isn't there, when the National Academy of Medicine report from 2011 showed that science is there, and it's clear as a bell. The only reason why they didn't recommend kicking it up a notch was A, pressure from the VA, and B, most importantly, is they said, we don't know exactly how much y'all were exposed. And we said, well, you don't know how much I was exposed in I Corps, Vietnam, the northern part of southern Vietnam, or my buddy who served down in the rice paddies in the southern part of the country. And they said, well, that doesn't matter. You both were exposed to enough. I said, okay, answer us this question. Doctor, can you tell us what is a safe dose of dioxin? And her eyes got as big as pie plates. And she said, well, there isn't one. We said, that's just our point. That's 7 parts per trillion up is considered to be harmful. So you don't have to take a lot with the looking at the hydrology of the South China Sea, particularly during monsoon, and how far out the residue was washed. There has been so much bogus nonsense coming out of VA. We're going to argue in the future not to disband that section and kick the science over to the National Institutes of Health, particularly the National Institute for Environmental Health Services, so we get honest, for real science, not bureaucratic gobbledygook. It's time for this bill to pass now, and thank you to Dr. Rowe and to all of my colleagues who have worked many, many hours to try and help bring the truth of this matter to the fore. I'm supposed to introduce probably somebody, my friend from the Blinded Veterans Association.
Actually, I'm Jim Kiken. I represent Military Veterans Advocacy. I'm not blind. I just happen to have a dog. I'm lucky. I do want to start off by expressing my appreciation to the General and his recognition of rank structure as a retired Sergeant Major in the United States Marine Corps, and also what he has expressed about this bill. This is dead serious, and to leave these veterans hanging out there is just not the right thing to do. I want to express the thanks of Military Veterans Advocacy to the chairman, the entire committee, and everyone that's worked so hard, all 382 in the House and 98 in the Senate, to get this through. And we will continue our fight both in the legislation but also litigation. We do have a current case pending, was just heard in front of the appeals court of the Federal Circuit. So we're hopeful there that one way or another, we're going to look out for our veterans. And I'd like to bring up John Davis from the FRA. Oh, right behind me.
Thank you. Hi, I'm John Davis from the Fleet Reserve Association. We represent Navy, Marine Corps, and Coast Guard enlisted people who have served in those branches or are serving. And so this issue is very important to us. I want to thank all the legislators here for their support in the past, and also the fact that it passed the House 382 to nothing, I think is a sign that the Senate should bring it up for a vote. When I think about this issue, I think about the whole Vietnam War era. And I remember, I was too young to serve in the Vietnam War, but I remember those days very vividly. And I remember service members coming home. At those days, they wore their uniform when they traveled back from Vietnam. And they would be in the bus station or the train station or the airport. And they'd be pretty much ignored by people because the Vietnam War was so unpopular. And even in some cases, they were not only ignored, they were disrespected. People came up and said horrible things to them about serving in Vietnam in an unpopular war. Now the Senate doesn't want to vote for this legislation. And I think that is once again people in America disrespecting and ignoring our Vietnam veterans. And I call on the Senate to vote on this legislation today and get this issue resolved. Thank you.
We'll be glad to take any questions at this point. I really appreciate everyone being here, and I think you can see the interest with the members and the VSOs to stick around this long, and I appreciate them doing that. Yes. I think it ought to get done in December. Not worry about January.
And I associate myself with the chairman's remarks. Well, I think that we have a chairman now who is a medical doctor, and he's vetted the science from his point of view, and I believe we need to move forward with the bill we have, and I don't want to deviate from the message that it needs to get done in December. We have a chance to do it now. We don't want to wait another year, 2 years, months down the road, and still have games be played. We need to get this done. Those two centers need to get off the dime now.
As I understand it, the proposal would affect not what it came up in the Blue Water negotiations. It would not affect Blue Water veterans, but future disease that would be added.
Yeah, I think, up to the chairman, but I think we take that up next time. Look, here's General Bergman and others have said this. I'm a Vietnam-era veteran. I served in Korea. Walked up, I spent I don't know how much time, the DMZ in Korea tromping around where they used Agent Orange. 523 Vietnam veterans are dying every day. 523 every day. It's time to get off the dime.
Just to follow on Alan's question there, if you do have to bring it back next term, do you see bringing up this exact same bill again, and how do we only support in the House? So do you see any changes, or would you send the same bill back?
I think that'll be up to, of course, to the chairman, but it'd be hard to bring up something different. It was 382 to 0. I think it'd be passed overwhelmingly again. I can't imagine where there would be any opposition in the House.
Well, as chairman, I've seen and participated in the work of bringing the VSOs together, listening to their concerns, and I see no reason to change this bill substantively. I believe we need to move forward. I will definitely bring this bill back as it is, but that is not my intent now. My intent is to make clear to the Senate we need to pass this bill, get it signed into law. I do hope that the president will issue a tweet in these two senators' states and let the voters of those states know that this is one of those rare situations where you have a unanimous House of Representatives, and there's no reason why these two senators need to be putting forward their theories about science, and we've heard from a number of people here, a number of members here. So I feel very confident that we need to move forward, and reluctantly, if this has to come back next session, I will move the same bill forward.
We'll take one more. I know you all have been very good, and thank you for being here and covering this. I can't thank you enough for that. But we'll take one more question, and to be respectful of everyone's time, I know we have a hard stop. Yes?
Are you all considering any additional pay-fors, or is there anything else on the table right now?
We've offered 4 different pay-fors, and we think they're acceptable. I know that we wouldn't have gotten this help without our VSO partners. We could not have done this. And this bill will be fully paid for. Some of it comes outside the 10-year budget window. But the veterans are going to live outside the 10-year budget window. And so that's not an issue. We do this all the time. If you roll the same pay-for over 1 more year or 2 more years, we do it all the time here. And this is not some fake pay-for like pension smoothing that I've had to put a clothespin on my nose for. This is real money, real dollars that are going to pay for this. Thank you all very much.
You just said,
yeah,
I'm reluctant to consider any new pay-fors on the table. I'm very, very uncomfortable with that idea. I think we need to pass the bill as is, make clear to those senators that stop playing games, get off the dime. this is no more, we don't have time to debate and evaluate and understand new paid-fors.
Thank you all.
Thank
Dr. Khan still fighting on it. It wouldn't be
Too bad it I mean, we're not done.
Fingers crossed. Keep the fight. Thank you. Good job, man. You did a great job. Great job.
Well, I supported Tim Walz's efforts, Ranking Member's efforts to advance the science, to at least get the VA to be able to study whether cannabis is helpful in treating a number of different veteran health issues. And I think that's only appropriate. I was disappointed that there couldn't be MOU, a memorandum of understanding between the Secretary of the VA and the Department of Justice. Because at the time, Attorney General Sessions has a much different attitude. So, we didn't have to go to legislative route. We could have moved forward with holding the VA harmless for moving forward with cannabis research. I very much believe it needs to be done. And many veterans will also be used anecdotally, not yet, and their claims are not yet validated by science. But I think the VA should be in the business with its enormous research capacity to latest issue the list. I would support it. I would support legislation which would look at the claims of veterans for the health benefits of cannabis and would certainly support members who want to bring forward their ideas. Maybe, yes. I mean, I don't know about the Senate, but the House, I've watched the House make incremental steps in a number of different fronts. There's improvement. There's a bipartisan group of members that are really, it is their issue they embrace. And I think the VA is one of the departments that has a very legitimate and valid interest in exploring alternatives to opioids, alternatives to treating PTS. We need to explore our options, and so that's only, I think, an open-minded scientific sort of attitude. Thank you very much. Thank you, brother. Oh, okay, thank you.
Mr. Takano, could you join us on the podium?
Hey, ready?
Who's there? It's sophistry, not science.
Well,
the evidence isn't there.
It's still that. Show us the science why you exclude it. Right, so that why, you can't shift the burden.
Well, it did. Yeah.
But that's good.
Well, the climate, and we can't hold
Great. So I just need this. All right, very good, thank you. If you want to push your mic down, Ms. Brownlee, if you could. Everyone, Mr. Bilirakis, if you could push, there you go. Have your hands in front of you to help you sit up straight. Excellent. Very good, thank you. On 3. 1, 2, 3. Very good. Another on 3. 1, 2, 3. On 3. 1, 2, 3. And one more. Excellent. No worries. That looks really good like that. So.